Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 643. My name is Eric Nielsen, and today is Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Today, I have my favorite co-host and my regular co-host, Matt Lungeth, and the expert specialist, Corey Romero, is with us as always. Matt, how you doing today?
Eric, I am well. Eric, one of the things that I got to do this past week was go up to a little hole in the wall in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Now, Williamsport, Pennsylvania, if you're not familiar, is north of State College, so we're in the center of the state. It is the county seat of Lycoming College. Now, in Williamsport, there is this small little, let's say cafe. And I walked in there and I had something in mind to eat. And I sat down, and the waitress told me about a special that they had with Gouda, pork belly, and bacon on sourdough, accompanied by tomato and Parmesan soup. It was utterly fantastic. Now, why I am telling you this story is I kind of thought about this, and it oddly enough kind of parlays in today's topic about multi-cloud, because sometimes in the multi-cloud scenarios that we're out there with, you want to be able to be functional with different workloads and be able to consume items on demand where you didn't necessarily think of it before, and to be mobile with those choices of where those decisions might be able to take place. And I'm sure that in that cheesy analogy, if you will, that Dave Wolpert, our guest today, will qualify if I'm on my right track there or not, because today we're talking about our multi-cloud briefing for April of 2023. But, sir, before we get to all of that, my favorite questions. How are you? How are things out in, I dare I say, the south central part of the world, you being in Hartsfield Jackson Airport, broadcasting live today? And what is the color of the tarmac?
Exactly. Matt, thanks for the shout out there. I feel like you, right, where I'm out and about meeting with SEs and discussing things that are happening out in the customer sphere. Yes, I am in Atlanta, and I got to go to the AirWatch campus in Atlanta. Pretty cool to see that. Super cool building. It reminds me of Facebook. Big space with lots of things. And they're all in on campus. They're busy working. Everybody's at their desks. People are in conference rooms. The food areas are well stocked. So it's been an adventure to be out here on the East Coast, where no one got the memo that you aren't supposed to go to work, right? So it's been fun, and here we are, and I'm excited to have Dave Wolpert on the call, because we're just always doing these things on Wednesday. But I don't know what the color is, but I would say that our reservoirs are full in California, and even the biggest one, Shasta, now is completely full, and we have the new lake down in Southern California. So weather is good, sunny, and can't wait to get home. But I am headed off to Chicago for the VMUG board meeting. So classic of spending the week on the road this week, and excited to see all the VMUG people as well. Let's throw it over to Corey Romero and see if we got any vExpert update.
Yeah, I've got a couple of vExpert updates and then community update too. So Blogger Passes applications are open. So you can go to the vExpert Twitter, which is twitter.com/vExpert, and you can look down. I think it's like the fourth post down there, a link to the applications. If you're a vExpert, that is in your email. Applications will close for the Blogger Passes on Friday, May 12th, and we will start voting. That way we can get the results out before early bird pricing ends. So that way, if you're not chosen, you can take advantage of the pricing. Also, vExpert program is looking for some interesting VMware-related technical demos to be presented to the vExperts for a 1-hour webinar. I did put a form out on Twitter as well. If you're a VMware employee, a VMware partner, or you're a vExpert that has some interesting tech that you want to share, if you're a vExpert and want to do something like demo your home lab, I put out a form to go fill out. I will be checking the form and reaching out to each individual person to discuss that. So if you want to take advantage of that, that is also on the Twitter, and that's about the 4th or 5th post down. vExpert sub-program awards were announced last Friday. The appeals for that are open until the Friday, April 28th. And I will be sending the appeals over to the sub-program managers tomorrow, the 20th, and then again on the 28th. And we will review all of those details and email you back with our decisions. And then also the call for VMTN talks and VMware code sessions are now open. For details, go to blogs.vmware.com/VMTN. And that's all I got.
All right, perfect. As always, I will do a shout out that obviously Explore is happening. Go register for Explore US is open. Call for papers were open. Call for papers for Europe also opened this week. So if you're one of our European friends and you want to do a session, Call for papers for Europe is open. You can find that on the vmware.com/explore website and go check that out and submit your papers, and we will continue moving on. With that, let's move over to Dave. And Dave, on the community podcast, as always, we invite you in. We like to give our listeners a little bit of history of how you got where you are. So why don't you give us, a little 3 or 4 minute pitch on your career arc? How did you get where you are? And then what do you do for VMware now?
Yeah, so thanks, Eric, and thanks, Matt, for having me today. So at VMware, let me start with the present. I am a solutions marketing manager, which is a combination of product marketer and content marketer. And specifically, I'm within a business unit at VMware called Cross Cloud Solutions. So we deal with everything that involves cloud, multi-cloud, or interoperability between clouds, a concept we call cross-cloud. And so that spans multiple different product areas within VMware. So I'm not aligned to any one product. I'm aligned to sort of general cloud challenges that our customers have and how we solve them, usually with a combination of our product portfolio. And I joined VMware about 1.5 years ago. My career arc leading up to that is kind of like a bad novel. I was a history major in college, and so obviously I then jumped into the world of IT way back in the day, where I was implementing federal accounting systems that written in COBOL on IBM mainframes for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So that's how I got started. That rolled into a variety of different IT roles in Detroit in the automotive industry, where I did everything from hardware and software tech support to network administration to database administration. I was writing apps in Visual Basic, technical training, technical documentation, you name it. And I eventually realized I had to get off that sort of super technical train, because I never saw myself as being that level of IT guy, but it was a great foundation. So I moved to Austin to attend graduate school and get my MBA, thinking I would then shift gears and be on the business side of the, ironically, auto industry. So I graduated in the late 90s, just when Austin and the whole tech sector in general was booming. And everybody wanted to work for a software company doing something. Back then, we often didn't even have job titles. We were just business guy, tech guy, I'm the developer guy, whatever. And so I began to work for a series of software companies, many of which I think you all know the story, you never would have heard of or no longer exist because they were merged or acquired dozens of times. But most of the companies I worked for were small to medium size. And then more recently, I started working for much larger ones. So before I came to VMware, I worked for IBM. So I've seen everything from the 1-person startup to the 10-person team to the 50,000 person company, and now I'm at VMware. So those are the broad strokes of my career.
That's a great narrative. Thanks for sharing that. A couple of things that strike me is like, Matt, I don't know if we should probably keep account of the degrees that people have gotten in, and what are the music majors? I think are number 1, but I think history majors are probably number 2 if we're not, and then maybe writing, or writing is a major, English lit might be one of IT people that have found a career in the IT industry, right? That we get to. So now, Dave, I gotta say, I'm looking at your camera view because we do live stream this on YouTube, VBarbecue, youtube.com/VBarbecue. You want to see what Dave looks like? I gotta say that, you know, most of the music majors will put guitars up on the wall, so you can tell like what their passion really was, even though they didn't get to do that for a living. I'm looking at your wall, so I'm not so sure. You know, the history. You know,
So I'm actually at VMware's offices in Austin. So I just grabbed a room. There's like 3 people on this floor. So I'm actually in the quiet zone, but you know.
So when you're at home, do you have like pictures of Napoleon on the wall, or you know, some other,
No, actually, I have a bass guitar right behind me because I play bass very badly, and I've got a lot of bands and musicians on the wall because I love music. But no, so I'm the music guy who wasn't actually a musician or didn't study music.
My only other comment is that I've worked at IBM, and my favorite story at IBM is that when I got there, the guy hands me a book and says, "Here, read this. You might get a desk in about another week or 2, and then you might get a terminal like in about a month, and then probably about 3 or 4 months from now, we'll figure out what we want you to work on." Right, and that was my experience at IBM.
Yeah, it varies, and I think it's come a long way since those days. I joined in 2017, and the company moved away from having desks and offices to just very, very long communal tables, and finding a place to sit just meant finding any empty seat. And
to show my age, I started IBM in 1984, right? Yep. And it was mainframes, and they had to wait for get a new mainframe terminal and get you set up. And so they're like, "Here, go read this manual," right? So that classic stuff.
Which is in a big binder that thick.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, it was big, and a blue IBM binder.
Everything was blue.
Everything was dark blue. Yep. Anyway, so moving on, we're going to talk, it's kind of interesting and exciting to have you on and to talk because, we're doing these quarterly multi-cloud briefs now, right? And another quarter has rolled by, and the brief is out. And I should just mention that if you wanted to go listen to that, you can just go to blogs.vmware.com/multi-cloud, or you can go to vmware.com and just click on multi-cloud on the front page. It takes you in and you can find it. But you got a good blog that's out there on the blogs.vmware.com multi-cloud site that you have a link to you can go watch the session, and you have some highlights. It's kind of neat. I don't know if you're seeing it, but I'm watching this narration get more mature, better, right? People are accepting it now. And I look at the executives when they're on this, like it starts with Vittorio and Raghu doing a chat, and they're talking about some of the key value props, right, that are coming out with the multi-cloud. And I just feel like it's maturing now to where they're actually talking about, I think in the early days, a year and a half ago when they was coming out, people were like scattered. It was kind of interesting, but you could tell there probably wasn't a lot behind it. But now I just feel like this whole thing has matured. Do you get that sense while you're watching this stuff?
I definitely do. It's interesting because I joined VMware just when the company was really embracing this concept of multi-cloud, which I felt other companies like IBM actually had been talking about for many years. And where IBM landed at one point was that, yes, there are some customers that are multi-cloud and have multi-cloud challenges, but most companies are some form of hybrid cloud. They still have some infrastructure on premises and then some things in the public cloud. And so IBM realized long ago that at some point you need to recognize that and embrace that too. VMware kind of went, made a deep bet on multi-cloud and kind of de-emphasizing private cloud or hybrid cloud models. And I think, honestly, we've come full circle in realizing that our customers are at all points in their journey. There are some that will never really let go of their on-premises or private cloud infrastructure, particularly in regulated industries, because there's significant and very real security concerns, and they feel they have more control and more protection by keeping some things on-prem. Or, Eric, thinking back to the mainframe days, if you're a company that has a mainframe on your premises, you're not going to just walk away from it, not because the hardware is necessarily as advanced as it could be, but because the software that probably your company spent years or even decades building on that platform, they don't want to walk away from that investment.
Refactoring is expensive.
Period. Yes. And especially when you're talking about a code base and COBOL going back 20 years. I mean, at IBM, we had clients like American Airlines that built their entire operations around a mainframe. And I don't know where they stand today, but a few years ago, they didn't want to just walk away from that and modernize it, as we would say. And so you have customers like that. You have customers that are entirely in public clouds and expanding their use of public clouds. But then most companies are somewhere in the middle. They're leaving some things on-prem. They're moving some things to the public cloud where it makes sense. And the official definition at VMware of what multi-cloud is, that comes from our C-suite, is simply an organization with an environment that uses 2 or more clouds in any combination. It could be 2 private clouds, 2 public clouds, a private and a public cloud. This could include edge clouds and sovereign clouds and any other kind of cloud. But we define it more as a number as a company, saying it's 2 or more. I think, what I'm starting to hear from some of our executives now is a shift to recognizing that it's not just that you have a handful of clouds. It's really about how an organization uses them. Are they being strategic in choosing specific clouds for specific use cases and workloads? Or is it more of an ad hoc strategy where you have shadow IT situations that result in you becoming multi-cloud, but that wasn't by strategic design? It was just sort of an accident. I call it accidental multi-cloud. And that's the most common use case. So really, what VMware can do is solve all of these scenarios, whether you're entirely on-prem, hybrid, or public entirely, or any combination of those. And it's especially valuable, and this is what we call being cloud smart, when companies, and we can help them do this, take a strategic approach to what they move to which cloud and why and how they manage it all as if it were one giant unified cloud as opposed to multiple siloed clouds.
Dave, that's significantly different than what we had heard before. When we think of that, of cloud first, right? From that cloud first approach, and even by definition, right? So let's back up a little bit. When we think of even as short as, I would say, 24 to 18 months ago, where you saw these enterprise and global accounts have a hyperscaler native consumption demand, right? We're all in. We're all in on the hyperscalers. We're going to be transitioning workloads up there. We're going to be refactoring applications. We are all in with moving workloads out of these on-premises data centers and then moving them out to the hyperscalers. Then I think that as we have seen is that we start to understand, one, not only the operational costs of refactoring some of those applications, but then the day 2 operational costs, right? Of what is things like egress and ingress into those hyperscalers, some of the adoption, and again, more like what I would call practical matters of, is there enough qualified staff that we can retain to bring in to operate on these new platforms? And then that all comes down to now a mix of, well, it's not so much about cloud first, but then now where should we place these cloud appropriate workloads? So now I think of it, when we think of cloud first, it is more of, we have workload mobility. We want to position ourselves. I think that's more from that director's C-suite level of, we want to be in a position where, to your point, sir, where we can place, and then not only place, but migrate as necessary as workload and costing changes to the appropriate runtime resources. In other words, if it makes sense to put authentication and directory services out on a hyperscaler, so be it. If not, if at one point for security concerns or for whatever operational reasons, we want to pull that back on-prem, we have that option. So it's a cloud first in a mobility I would say, approach rather than we're just going to dump everything out there in the and one of the hyperscalers as we saw before. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Matt, I think that's right. But I think moving workloads, whichever direction they're heading, is only the first step. Then the question becomes now how or whether I modernize the apps I've moved. How do I manage all of these different clouds I now have? How do I ensure a consistent security posture across all of these clouds? And so this is where VMware comes in. And I think we have a really compelling sort of full life cycle story here, which is if you need it, we can help you move it. If you need it, we can help you manage it. And part of management is managing cost, which was a major theme in the multi-cloud briefing we just launched. Because cost can't be done in a vacuum. Cost decisions really involve making trade-offs about performance and about security. Everything you do has a cost. So it's not just about lowering the total cost. I mean, that's an ideal side benefit, but it's really about optimizing your spend based on whatever you're trying to optimize for a particular app. It might be performance, it might be security, but it could be everything. So,
I'll add a piece in here just for a second, which is one of the things I'm noticing is a lot of people in the big organizations have already got things in the cloud, right? And having now multiple groups that I'm managing, you go into these areas and you're like, you know how hard it is to shut down an area that's already in a cloud, right? It's very difficult, to say, okay, let's change the way. No, I don't. They're like, no, you get attacked, you get 1,000 reasons why. And now I got an org that's I've got multi-cloud already. I bet every enterprise in existence already has multi-clouds because in groups go choose different cloud services, spin them up and run them. And as an IT guy now, as an IT leader, I have to try to make sense of this, right? Cost management is one of those. Security is one of those. Just application migration, development tools, all these things. And I think that VMware kind of hit on something here, which is we'll give you a framework. You don't have to tell a group to turn off their cloud, right? You don't have to tell this other group that they have to go to a different cloud. You can just come in and put framework in place to help manage these, manage the costs, manage the workloads, manage the security, and you can stay on these multiple clouds. So I think we're enabling, CIOs to actually tackle a very tricky situation at companies where they've already got multi-cloud and now they're just trying to back into a strategy to control it.
Yeah. I think, Raghu in the briefing talks about this concept of companies now have to play offense and defense. And so just to take a step back of, how we got into the very situation you're talking about, Eric, in the last few years, companies were playing offense, meaning they were investing heavily in IT and app development. And they had to, partly because of COVID, not entirely, but largely. And so COVID disrupted everyone's business models. And the way out of that disruption was intense focus on innovation. And so software developers during this time became the heroes of the story because the faster they could release new apps, the more likely the company was to survive the storm that we had. And these are apps, everything from consumer-facing apps to back-end apps. I mean, really any kind of app. And so companies during that time of sort of organized chaos probably weren't being as diligent as they normally would have been about things like, should we allow developers to stand up an application in a cloud that's easiest for them to use or cheapest? I mean, they were making decisions on the fly at a very rapid pace, and they had to, again, for survival. And so now things have switched a bit. Obviously, COVID has calmed down somewhat, but now we have new economic challenges, macroeconomic challenges around the world, right? Everything from supply chain disruptions that still continue to rising interest rates to geopolitical tensions. And that's affecting every company on the planet to some extent, some more than others, obviously. And so now companies have to play defense. They have to say, well, wait a minute, let's take a step back and look at some of the investments we've been making in the last few years and ask the critical questions about things like cost, spend in general. Did we invest in the right things? Should we continue to spend on this cloud and that cloud and that cloud, for example? And these are difficult decisions, but the interesting situation we find ourselves in is companies can't now take their foot off the gas on the offense part. They still need to innovate. They still need to move quickly to outsmart the competition. They're still getting disrupted by other companies or new technologies like AI. Well, AI is not new, but ChatGPT has put AI back on the radar of a lot of IT organizations, saying, "Oh wow, this really is it's potentially very disruptive or potentially very helpful." And so now companies are saying, we have to play offense and defense simultaneously. How do we do that? And Raghu's answer always is, well, this is where our cloud smart premise comes in. This is where companies have to make informed, more strategic, more data-driven decisions about what they're doing and how they're doing it, while at the same time, they need to continue to innovate. And then, so we have to help them from a product portfolio standpoint, do things like app development with our Tanzu portfolio, and also things like cost management with our ARIA portfolio. And so we're kind of helping companies balance the offensive posture and the defensive posture.
Dave, I think of utility choice, right, for power or perhaps phone. And if you had a POTS line, right, a dry copper pair coming to the house where it was easy to change from one carrier to the next, and there was a common set of framework amongst these providers of what that long distance service would be, so that you can compare A to B to C, right? You knew what your per minute rate would be. If for those that can remember those days where we were talking about intra-ladder billing and whatnot, and cost containment for long distance lines before it became consume as you must. However, I don't believe that we're there yet with those hyperscalers, right? Because the hyperscalers have these independent billing services and ways of consumption for even similar offerings that can be what look like to be similar in nature, but then by disparate in billing. And sometimes that's the nature of the platform, and sometimes that's by design to be a little bit sticky, if you will, with the service. When we look at Cloud Health, or what was the former Cloud Health platform, now over in ARIA Operations, I think that as we talk about Cloud Smart, and part of that now offensive maneuvering that we're getting into is the analysis of that and being able to at least bring these data points into a data lake, and where there isn't necessarily the commonality by description, at least we can start to have some type of a framework to perform this cost analysis. And that is then enabling these operators that are out there in the field and consuming these services to have a little bit of an idea of what might be going on, rather than just trying to compare one to the next. I think that so much of this was innovation at speed, but not necessarily innovation at economies of scale.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And we talk about this in the briefing a lot. There's a great conversation with Purnima Padmanabhan, who heads the business unit that includes ARIA. And she talks about the challenges of cost visibility in a multi-cloud environment. Because you would think intuitively, if I get one bill from my one cloud provider, it would make sense to me and I could compare that to someone else's bill. But of course, it's not ever an apples to apples comparison. Just like most of our utility bills, there's a lot of things, a lot of line items.
Subtle nuances, right? Sure, yes. It all adds up.
Yes, and they don't use the same language. And so it's really hard to compare. And so visibility into that is the first step. You need to understand what's happening, what the costs really are in all your different clouds before you can make intelligent, data-driven decisions about it. And I think there are point solution products on the market that help you figure out your bill and kind of break it down that way. But I think the beauty of ARIA Cost is that it's not really just a cost reporting tool. It's not there just to give you the numbers on one screen. It's there to help you make better choices and decisions, right? So it's trying to inform you about things like, should you migrate a workload to a different cloud? Maybe you'll get economies of scale on that cloud. Or should you repatriate a workload? Or should you consolidate services? Do you have unutilized resources somewhere that you're paying for but not using? Those are important decisions. So when you talk about being cloud smart, those are things you need to know. And also, Pernimas really stresses the issue of making trade-offs, that things like performance has a cost, right? If you want more performance, you may need more compute. And there's a cost to that. But maybe for a particular app that's not mission critical, being high performance is not as critical. And so maybe you could save money there. Whereas security might be something you say, look, there's just no way we can sacrifice that. We have to spend whatever it takes to have a secure workload. And so I think it's that the visibility is the table stakes to doing this well, but then it's really about better decision making and evaluating cost decisions as trade-offs with other factors.
Nice. Listening to this, I also listened to I would encourage everybody to go listen to the event, right? Because I think it was worth listening to Raghu and Vittorio just talk at the beginning, and then going into modern apps and the discussion around modern apps, and then also ARIA. One of the things, I love the smart name, right, that they're using, Cloud Smart. And there's a little bit of me that thinks, I wonder also if there's a play here around the fact that maybe 60% of or 70% of our customer base still runs on-prem, right? And letting them know that it's actually okay to stay on-prem, right? There's a smart way to approach going to the cloud. You can have your on-prem workloads, you can have them managed. We do multi-cloud, and therefore you can really be smart about where to migrate and when not, where to migrate, how to migrate, what the workload needs to be, what cloud offering. So for those 60 to 70% that haven't jumped into the cloud yet, most of them are polled that they will jump in, that we're actually also setting the stage of, you want to do this smart. Don't just be the leading edge people are now trying to put processes in place, right, to manage that growth that they aggressively went in for. If you're not there yet, you might want to get there, but take a smart approach to it, and VMware can lead you on that journey. I feel like there's a really smart way of using the smart name in this approach.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean this sincerely. I think one of VMware's real competitive advantages is that, again, we have solutions to meet customers at any of those points of need. So for example, ARIA Cost is really about understanding your cloud spend in public clouds. ARIA Operations is really, it does similar things for private clouds. So ARIA Operations looks at things like how to save on power consumption and other costs by looking at things like your server or storage utilization, powered off VMs, idle VMs, oversized VMs. It looks at orphan disks. And so it's looking at your environment and saying, there's places where you're just not utilizing your resources cost effectively in your on-prem environment. And it makes recommendations in almost plain English to suggest ways to save money. And it even calculates how much you're anticipated to save. And in the briefing, we actually show demos of ARIA Cost and ARIA Ops back to back to give you a sort of a feel for just the spectrum of capabilities there. But I think that's, again, the strength of VMware's portfolio. We can help you whether you're entirely on-prem, entirely off-prem, or anything in between.
So I'm looking at the agenda you have in your blog article, and obviously we've talked about Raghu and Vittorio. And you mentioned Pranim, I don't know how to say her name,
Purnima. Yeah.
Purnima, talking about modern apps and, just what you talked about. But we also have John McLaughlin and Chris McCain. Maybe
Yeah.
we should talk a little bit of what was John's role in the event.
Yeah, so just to take a step back for some context, the briefing is all about helping companies walk that balance between offense and defense. We call the briefing navigating economic headwinds, macroeconomic headwinds with a cloud smart approach. And there's two core areas we look at. One is, as we've been talking about, cost management. So getting a handle on your costs, making better decisions regarding costs, making trade-offs about cost. Part of it also is shifting left, getting your developers and operators and security teams involved earlier on in decisions when you're developing applications that could affect the cost ultimately of when those applications are running, wherever they're running. The other half of it that we look at is security, and specifically ransomware. And the reason we talk about ransomware in an economic context is because I think a lot of companies de-emphasize that it's not just about the cost of the ransom if they choose to pay it, or about the often temporary business disruption of a ransomware attack, but rather the loss of goodwill and trust in the eyes of your customers, partners, potentially your investors and your employees. And so we think about ransomware in terms of it having significant and sometimes severe costs in everything from whether you choose to pay the ransom to the just business disruption costs, and then the lack of trust can be even more. So obviously, ransomware is something that's top of mind for all companies, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. And so it's important to cover that as we do. But really, we look at the economic impact of ransomware, and defending against that should be very high on the agenda of every company, and in fact is. So we're covering security in both a technical context as well as an economic context. Chris McCain does a segment regarding just the general strategy companies want to take in terms of developing defenses against ransomware. A lot of it is, of course, a technical solution. You do need external and internal firewalls and network detection and response systems. But that's just part of it. You need to have good planning even before you go into that. And then we also show in the briefing a demo of VMware ransomware recovery, which is a really fantastic solution that helps companies recover from a ransomware attack, but it does it with a very intuitive guided workflow. So it kind of walks the IT operator through the process step by step, explaining what's happening at every step to ensure that recovery is not just done correctly and efficiently, but with minimal disruption to the business operations of the company. So yeah, that's the security side of the multi-cloud briefing we did. I think you're on mute, Eric.
Yes, I was, because I'm in the airport, so it's they're making announcements on occasion for flights. I try to mute myself when I'm while you're talking. Yeah. So I think that makes a lot of sense. From multi-cloud to multi-cloud, I noticed that we've had customers come in at given times. I mean, pull the curtain back a little bit. How do you guys decide? You get to see behind the curtain. How do you guys decide what you're going to cover from quarter to quarter?
That's a great question. So usually the briefings are linked more or less timing-wise with a VMware product launch. For example, we, in a previous briefing, covered multi-cloud management around the same time that VM ARIA was launched. So that's a nice intuitive one. But in this briefing, we went in a different direction and said, let's just look at what's out there, what's top of mind for both technical and business leaders. And obviously, the macroeconomic conditions are paramount. They're affecting, as I mentioned earlier, every company, one way or another.
Yeah, I wanted to add that there's nothing like a good recession to make you step back and look at some defensive strategies, right? Yep.
And and we started planning the briefing a few months ago, and so we had no idea what the economy was going to look like in April when the briefing launched. But we just assumed that things would not improve radically overnight. I mean, geopolitical tensions were still going to linger. There were still going to be high interest rates that wouldn't change very quickly.
Cost of energy still here, right? Like there's a lot of things that are happening, right?
And supply chain disruptions have gotten a little bit better, but there's still ripple effects. But now we saw, for example, the bank collapse, the Silicon Valley Bank and Credit Suisse. We didn't predict that. We saw multiple layoffs at a lot of tech companies, and so some things got better, maybe some things got worse. And so all that we know for sure is in 2023, we are in a time of economic turbulence and uncertainty. And that is going to affect every company, if it hasn't already, to some extent.
It's interesting too, because I've done a little of this on my AWS bills, right? I've done a little bit of my personal bills where you finally sit down and you go, okay, what are the low hanging fruit things that we just went crazy because, we were trying to do land grabs. We were trying to do, we're trying to get to places. We wanted to make our strategy happen. And so we weren't really cost conscious at the time. And so it is a moment in time where you reflect and you go, okay, what are some of the low hanging fruits? How do we use area to actually look at some of the stuff and optimize what our cloud spend is from point to point? So it is one of these times where you're actually pushed by necessity, a little bit of worry, a little bit of just, it's smart to be defensive, to be actually, you look and optimize some of these things that we put in place that maybe we could optimize.
Right, exactly. And I think the underlying question that every IT organization is facing, every company is facing throughout the company is, how are we going to do more with less? Less could mean smaller budget. It could mean less headcount. But
I thought that was just Moore's law, right? We just get more for less. Right? That's why they call it Moore's law, I thought.
Right. But in an economic context, though, it's quite the challenge. And I think what VMware offers is part of the solution, but it is just one piece. It's so to your question, I mean, that's really why we chose this topic, because it is so timely.
And for people that want to go listen, they'll be able to walk away. I'm still going to try to pull the curtain away behind, because, you listened this far in the podcast, so I'll hit you with another one. So what do the numbers look like for something like this? How many people actually listen to this stuff?
Yeah. So we're very pleased that the multi-cloud briefing series is the most successful content program VMware has ever run. The briefing we launched just 2 weeks ago now has over 4 million views. Previous briefings were anywhere from 3.5. One, I think, was 7.5 million. And you got to dig into the numbers. A lot of it, very few people are watching the whole thing. These briefings range from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. But a lot of people are watching 10, 15, 20 minutes of it, which is great. And there's usually something for everyone within that. So every briefing has multiple segments. Some are really targeted for a business audience. Some are more technical with product demos and so forth. And so I think, that's the beauty of it, that we promote the briefing, and it always surprises us who's watching which segment and for how long and what's the most popular briefing overall. And
so 7 million, pretty good. I remember in the early days when we would do some of these things, we ended up getting like 4 million. We were super excited, but then we looked at it and we were on Spike TV. John Furrier from theCUBE managed to stuff us over on Spike TV, and we were doing streams on people weren't buying IT products on old reruns of A-Team. But I gotta say, now I those numbers feel real to me, and I gotta say congratulations for putting out a really nice. That's why I bring you on, because I think it's, if you haven't listened to these things, they're interesting to listen to. And I gotta say, you're fairly new to VMware, but I would say that I've watched VMware do this kind of thing where when I first came here, it was not even vSphere, it was just VI Infrastructure 3, right? And it was just basically ESX, and then we did ESXi, and I thought, wow, we're virtualizing compute. This is the coolest thing ever. We're a compute company. We do virtual machines, right? And then we started to do storage and networking. We acquired Nicira, and I thought, wow, what a trip. And then we rebranded it SDDC, and I thought, oh, this is never going to work. We're never going to be able to get past compute because the network admins are all bought into Cisco, and they're not going to do this. But then over time, SDDC became just this default thing that we started to do, and it was like, oh, okay, I guess we could do this. And then we tried to dabble with cloud to do it again, right? To get into a whole nother market. And oh gosh, cloud was like one of these things that I'm not sure. We did vCloud Air, and I'm like, we're never gonna be a cloud vendor. But then, I think we bought AirWatch, which was kind of like device management, but it got us a little closer. Then we got into AWS and VMC and AWS, and all of a sudden we're actually starting to become a cloud. Then we started putting all our stuff in the cloud, so you can now buy all of our products as a SaaS service. I'm like, wow, we did it again. We're actually a valid cloud service provider, right? Mm-hmm. And now, if you talked to me a year ago, I'd be like, oh, multi-cloud, right? Like, good luck with that, right? Oh, we're going to make a fabric across. You go play on AWS, you go play on Azure. They're never going to let us do this, let alone Google and Oracle and IBM and Alibaba and 15 other cloud vendors that are out there. But I actually look at it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, we actually have a cloud fabric. We have a cloud solution, and it's gaining traction. And pretty soon when I'm out in the field here, everybody's, oh, well, yeah, this is something that everybody wants to talk about. Everybody wants to talk about, everybody wants to learn it. And this is the one thing that I would say that I've heard from out in the field is that we still have a lot of work training people on what the solution is, how to architect it, where to use what. If you do have multi-cloud, how do I learn the things that I need to learn in order to take my customer on this journey? Do you see some of that, and you see us making some progress in that space?
Yeah,
I told you it was going to be harder, right? I said at the end of the podcast, they get harder.
Yeah, that could be a whole podcast discussion by itself. I mean, I think
your momentum answers that question, right? You are making momentum here. You are getting the message out.
We're doing what we can, and it really does take a village. And it's not me producing the briefing. There's so many people working behind the scenes to create it and promote it, and spread the word, like you, Eric. So thank you for doing this podcast to help us get the word out. But about VMware more in general, I mean, I think you're right. These messages take a long time to really get absorbed by the people who need to absorb them. And that includes our own internal teams, right? So we have a lot to work on in terms of training our sellers and our all the technical folks we have at the front lines with our customers. And then they need to train and educate customers and let the word disperse throughout their organizations too. It does take a long time. And, I'm glad VMware started when they did, because I'd much rather be early to the market with these messages than late. So we still got a lot to do, but we're off to a good start.
It was a trick question, because on our podcast, see, your podcast number 643 in this series, but guess what was on 642? Carl Childs came in and talked to us about multi-cloud training and multi-cloud certification. So if you guys want the real answer to that, go back and listen to podcast number 642 a week ago, and Carl Childs will give you all the services you can do for getting ready to be a multi-cloud architect. So you're right, it does take a village, and we got the village of pumping here. So
excellent.
It actually is fun. As we come up, we've almost been running an hour. I see 48 minutes, so we got the last 10 minutes of the show. I'd like to talk a little bit about where do we see ourselves going. I think it's probably you're going to answer more of the same. We got Explore coming up. Are you prompting for that? What's the rest of your year look like, and what gets you excited?
Interesting question. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. So we're at the early stages of.
You submitted your paper requests, right? You're hoping that you get to go.
Yes, I personally have not. No, we are our team is working on some of the keynotes that will be delivered at Explore, very early stage on those. We're also at the early stages of planning the next briefing, which would be in July, and we don't yet know the topic. So we're excited about it, but I've nothing to share specifically about
Yeah,
other
of
than
course. Yeah. So you got another briefing before
yeah,
Explorer even comes, so that'll keep you busy
exactly.
just on its own right. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're still doing so many other things on the marketing front. We all wear so many hats. So I, for example, am working on some vertical messaging now. So for the financial services sector
Sure.
specifically.
Right.
And we're always doing other things behind the scenes in terms of research insights, working with marketing to C-level executives through our CIO program. We're a very busy team doing quite a few things.
I would say you are the hot ticket these days, right? Like there is a lot of need for that. And I saw a bar chart yesterday or a pie chart yesterday that showed that the percentage of people that are interested in multi-cloud and cloud, the biggest one was the financial services, right? I think they came in at like 23% of all requests are coming in from the big financial service firms that are really jumping on board here.
Yep, and cloud is challenging for them because of security concerns that they have. I mean, often they're perceived security concerns, not necessarily true security problems, but we have to address their concerns. We have to make sure that our technology overcomes any concerns or actual technical bottlenecks that they do have. So again, it takes time and it's an uphill effort, but it's a battle worth fighting. But yeah, in terms of most excited, I mean, I always get excited by the briefings and the events. I mean, one of the things I miss so much is that VMware is almost entirely a virtual company. And I love that flexibility, but I really, really enjoy getting together with other VMware employees and my own team, of course, and collaborating and sharing insights and working productively with other people in a physical office. I mean, I really missed that for the last couple of years. So
I would say that I'm in the same boat where I'm in Atlanta now, where we did meet with the CTAB organization. It's like 15 SEs that come together, and you go back to your cave for a few more months, and then now I get out maybe once a quarter. And every time I get out, I'm like, oh, thank God I'm out of the cave, right? I'm meeting people and I'm engaging with people. I feel like everybody's my best friend when I see them now, because I'm just like, I feel like a dog that the owner's coming home every week or so, because I feel like I get to see people again and I get to have conversations. And like, it's just like like we've done a couple of these now, and it's like, I have yet to meet you, right? One of these days I'm gonna meet you. I'm like, dude, how's it going? Right? Like it is fun to get out.
I always find that after a while, you just imagine that everyone is like a 2-inch by 2-inch, two-dimensional image.
Yeah,
You don't think of them as three-dimensional anymore until you meet them in person and realize, no, these are not people on a Zoom call. These are people.
Right. Yeah. And you definitely get a stronger connection when you eventually meet them, because it's like a long lost person that you haven't got to see. Right. And so it is a lot of fun. I would argue that, I think that everybody should have a mental health, budget, right? And we should just use Explore as a mental health purchase, right? Like, even if you can't get your IT boss to fund you to come to Explore, you should go to the HR department or the whoever funds you for your that expand your career horizon and or mental health benefit. Like, I think I used my mental health benefit one time to buy a dishwasher, but I'm starting to think that I should use it to come to some of these events, whether it's user cons, VMUGs, or other things where you just get to meet people, because it is really very healthy, right?
Absolutely. Especially our customers and our partners. We need to get closer to them physically as well as from a marketing perspective. It's really important.
Well, if you guys are listening to this and you've managed to make it through 53 minutes of us talking about a briefing and our excitement around multi-cloud, which I'm super excited about, we'll end up with the barbecue report, because we do stream on youtube.com/vbarbecue. You can go find this video. It'll be labeled the number 641, and you can see what Dave looks like. But Dave, do you get to do any barbecue out of Texas? Doesn't have barbecue, do they? I think they don't even have cattle down there. I think they have chickens.
That's right. We don't have any more beef.
Yeah.
Just still chicken. Yeah, no, I do love barbecue. I mean, I think if you live here, you have to. It's sort of part of everything we eat. And I'm a brisket kind of guy.
Yeah,
Brisket's my
brisket.
Mhm.
It's kind of weird. I'm not a big brisket fan. I just don't know why. I just don't get into brisket. It crumbles apart. It's like, I don't know. I'll
You gotta
just
get
go for the
fatty
ribs.
brisket. You have to have a lot of fat in there for the flavor, and it holds it together, and it makes it great.
I do like the burnt ends, but I don't know if burnt ends are part of a brisket or whether burnt ends are just a part of something else. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't do the
Yeah.
burnt ones. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah. There you go. Brisket. Do you ever do any barbecue? And if so, are you a smoker? Are you a Kingsford charcoal guy? Are you gas grilling? What are you doing?
I have a gas grill, but I'm not making real barbecue with it like
Oh,
some people
yeah, yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah. You just because are you out of Austin still?
Yeah.
Or are you yeah, yeah. So if you're out of Austin, you can go to like Mr. Stubbs or you can go to all these great places in Austin. I guess you don't really have to barbecue yourself, right?
That's right.
Because
I mean, there's
there's
a
just
place
so
every
many
corner.
options.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Well, that's cool. Final thing, how would people find you or the topics that you're obviously we mentioned the blog. We can mention it again. It's blogs.vmware.com/multi-cloud. Go there and you can see blog articles from Dave and others. Are you on Twitter and where else would people might find you?
I just don't use Twitter much at all. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, under Dave Wolpert, not David, but yeah, find me on
Okay,
LinkedIn.
Dave, Wolpert. You can go give him a follow on LinkedIn. Maybe he'll cross follow you back. Who knows? And if
Maybe.
nothing else, go check out his blog. I don't think we allow comments on the blog, so you get what you get when it comes to go over the blog.
But I'd love your feedback. So, if
Yeah.
if we're on LinkedIn, just send me a note. Let me know what you thought.
Yeah, I'll just publish his phone number. I'll look it up and I'll tweet it out to everybody. You can text him. He's great at that.
Everyone else does. Yeah, you can do that.
Dave Wolpert, thanks a lot for coming on the show. Thanks for doing all the work on the broadcast. And maybe we'll get you back on in another quarter and see what's new.
You bet. Thanks so much, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it too. Talk to you later.
All right. Take care.